The smell hit me before anything else. Antiseptic and something stale underneath it, the kind of air that hasn't moved in days. I was there to drop off a casserole from my old neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, who'd broken her hip in February. The hallway was long and pale, and every room looked like a copy of the last one. I was counting doors when I heard a voice from inside room 14. Eleanor? I stopped. That was my grandmother's name. I looked at the door tag. It was crooked, half peeled at one corner. The name written on it in black marker was Albert Moss, my ex-husband's uncle. The man who had taught Tommy how to fish, who showed up every Thanksgiving with a pecan pie he'd made himself, who always stood up when a woman entered the room because he said his mother raised him right. I stood there in that hallway for a long moment, not moving. Tommy and I had been divorced for 2 years. The split wasn't violent. It was quiet, which is sometimes worse, the kind of thing that ends in a kitchen at 9 in the morning when you both realize you've been strangers for a while, and neither of you tried hard enough to fix it. I didn't hate Tommy. I didn't hate his family. But I had stepped out of that world completely and told myself it was the healthy thing to do. I told myself a lot of things that turned out to be wrong. I pushed the door open a little. He was in a chair by the window, the same way I remembered him. Upright, deliberate, but something was different now. His shoulders were curved in. His hands rested in his lap like they belonged to someone else. There was nothing on the windowsill, no cards, no plants, just light coming through the glass and falling across a man who looked like he was waiting for something he no longer believed would come. "Uncle Albert," I said softly. He turned, and for a second, just a second, something lit up behind his eyes. "Claire?" He squinted. "No, wait." His face shifted, went uncertain. "I'm sorry. I thought you were someone else." "It's okay," I said. "It's me. I'm Tommy's." I paused. "We used to have Thanksgiving together." He studied my face the way you study something you've almost placed. Then he nodded slowly, like he was filing it away somewhere he wasn't sure he'd find again. "Yes," he said. "The one who made the sweet potatoes." "That's me," I said. I pulled up the chair near the window and sat with him. I'd meant to stay 10 minutes. I stayed an hour. He drifted in and out of the conversation. One moment sharp and present, the next somewhere else entirely, calling me Eleanor again, or asking about a dog he used to have. But in between, there were these clear pockets where he was completely himself. He told me about a trip he took to Montana in 1987. He told me the orderly on the night shift played his music too loud. He told me the jello they served on Sundays was an insult. I laughed at that one. Actually laughed. When I stood to leave, he looked up at me and said quietly, "Come back if you can." His voice didn't have any expectation in it. It was the kind of thing a person says when they've already learned not to count on things. I drove home and I kept thinking about that door tag, crooked and half peeled. About the empty windowsill. About the way he'd said my grandmother's name into an empty hallway. I went back the following Tuesday. And the Tuesday after that, I started bringing things. Not big things. A small succulent in a green pot because I read that plants help. A puzzle he probably wouldn't finish but might enjoy starting. A bag of peanut butter crackers because I remembered him always having them in a bowl at his house during the holidays. The nurses started recognizing me. They'd nod when I came in, the way they nod at people who belong. Tommy's name never came up. I didn't ask whether he visited. I didn't need to. The empty windowsill had already answered that. About a month in, on a Thursday afternoon, I walked in, and Uncle Albert was staring at the wall on the opposite side of the room. He didn't turn when I came in, which was unusual. He usually heard me in the hallway. I set the crackers down on his tray and sat beside him, and after a while he said, without looking at me, "They're going to take the house." I went still. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully. He turned then, and his eyes were completely clear. Not the foggy, drifting quality they sometimes had. These were the eyes I remembered from Thanksgiving. Focused, measuring, like he was deciding whether to say the rest. "Thomas and his wife," he said. "They've been coming here with papers. I don't always understand what papers say, but I know what they're asking me to sign." "What are they asking you to sign?" He folded his hands in his lap. "The house has been in this family since 1962. My father built it. There's a piece of land attached to it, out past the county line." He paused. Thomas always knew what that land was worth. He just waited until I couldn't fight back. A chill moved through me. "Have you signed anything?" I asked. He shook his head, but he looked tired when he did it. The kind of tired that comes from resisting something over and over until resistance itself becomes exhausting. "Don't sign anything," I said. Not until you understand every word, okay? He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, I remember you. From before. You were always the one who paid attention. I didn't know what to do with that, so I just said, I'm still paying attention. That night I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and started looking things up. Real estate law in our state. Power of attorney, conservatorship, undue influence. The terms I'd overheard him use. The papers, the land past the county line, kept circling in my head. I found enough to understand that what he was describing was not just family greed. It was potentially elder financial abuse. And I knew enough to know I needed someone who understood it better than I did. I called my friend Petra, who'd gone to law school before switching careers. She listened to everything I said, and then she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, if what you're describing is accurate, this needs more than advice. He needs a real estate attorney and probably an elder law advocate. Do you want me to make some calls? I said yes. I didn't go to the facility on Friday. I went downtown instead, to a small office off the main street, with a parking lot full of sensible cars. I sat across from a woman who'd been handling elder law cases for 19 years, and I told her everything. She wrote things down. When I finished, she looked at her notes and said, without drama, this is a pattern we see. Cognitive decline, isolation, family member with access, and motive. What you're describing has a name. She gave me a list of things to do, what to document, what to ask the facility, what rights he had, and then she said, come back when you're ready to move forward, we'll be here. The next week I came to the facility earlier than usual. I was walking down the hallway when I heard Tommy's voice through the door of room 14. I stopped. He had a way of speaking when he wanted something, a practiced calm, each word placed deliberately, the way someone speaks when they've rehearsed it. I recognized it. I'd been on the receiving end of it. Just put your initials there, he was saying. That's all. Right on that line. Uncle Albert's voice was quieter, uncertain. What does this part mean? A pause. Then a woman's voice, his new wife, I assumed, from the impatience in her tone. It's standard language. It doesn't mean anything different than what we explained. But I don't remember you explaining, Uncle Albert. Tommy's voice hardened slightly at the edges. We've been over this. You're making it harder than it needs to be. I pushed the door open. 3 heads turned. Tommy's expression went through about 4 things in 2 seconds. Surprise, recognition, irritation, and then that smooth blankness he used as armor. Claire, what are you doing here? I stepped inside and looked at the papers in his hand. Visiting, I said. Same as always. His wife crossed her arms. She was looking at me the way people look at something they didn't account for. Uncle Albert was watching me. His eyes were somewhere between the foggy version and the clear version, but there was something alert in them, something aware. I'd like to see those, I said, nodding toward the papers. Tommy pulled them slightly back. This is family business. He is family, I said, and he doesn't understand what he's signing. I heard him say so. You heard wrong. I looked at Tommy steadily. I want to see the documents. The room went tight and silent. His wife said quietly, almost to herself, this is unbelievable. Uncle Albert moved then. It was slow. He reached out one hand and pushed the papers away from where Tommy had extended them toward him. His voice when he spoke was careful and deliberate. I want to wait, he said. I want to have someone explain it to me. Tommy's jaw shifted. Dad, he stopped himself. Albert, you trust me. You've always trusted me. Uncle Albert didn't answer that. He just kept looking at the papers, like they were something he'd already decided about. I'll be bringing someone with me next week, I said to Tommy, as evenly as I could manage. Someone who can help him understand what he's agreeing to before he signs anything. Tommy looked at me. The practiced calm was still there, but there was something underneath it now, a tightness. You're not part of this family anymore, he said. No, I said, but he is, and someone should act like it. I left before it turned into something uglier. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a minute, with my hands on the steering wheel, and let the adrenaline settle. Then I called Petra. The following Thursday, I came back with an elder law attorney. She was small and quiet-spoken and wore a cardigan that made her look like someone's favorite teacher, but when she spoke, every word had weight behind it. Tommy and his wife were already there when we arrived. I don't know if someone at the facility had told them, or if they just happened to pick the same day. Either way, Tommy stood up when we walked in and his face went somewhere between cold and careful. Who is this? He asked. She introduced herself. She didn't raise her voice. She explained that she was there to ensure that any legal documents being presented to Albert Moss were fully explained and that Albert's cognitive capacity was properly evaluated before he signed anything. His wife said, "He doesn't need a lawyer, he has family." The attorney looked at her pleasantly and said, "He has the right to independent counsel regardless of family involvement. That's the law." Tommy turned to Uncle Albert. His voice shifted into something softer, more familiar. "You know me, you know I would never do anything that wasn't in your best interest." Uncle Albert was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I know you need money, Thomas. You've needed it for a while. I'm not as confused as you think I am." The room changed. I felt it. A shift in pressure, like right before a storm. Tommy's voice dropped. "I've been handling everything for you. Your bills, your insurance, this facility. Do you know what that costs?" "I know what the house costs," Uncle Albert said. "And I know what the land is worth. Your father told me, back when he first bought it. He said, 'Albert, don't ever let anyone take this from the family.' He wasn't talking about other people. He was talking about all of us." Tommy stood very still. The attorney spoke then. She explained that any signature obtained while there was a question of cognitive impairment could be legally challenged. She explained that a proper evaluation would need to be completed before any transfer of property was considered valid. She suggested, calmly and without accusation, that it would be in everyone's interest to proceed correctly. Tommy picked up the papers from the tray where they were sitting. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Fine," and he left. His wife followed him without looking at anyone. After they were gone, Uncle Albert sat back in his chair and let out a long breath. He looked tired, but something else too. Lighter, somehow. "Thank you," he said. He said it to both of us, but he was looking at me. "I come back every week anyway," I told him. He nodded. "I know," he said. "I've been keeping track." The days that followed moved quickly. The facility was notified that Albert had independent legal representation. His file was flagged. A formal cognitive evaluation was scheduled. Every document that had been presented to him in the past several months was requested for review. Tommy showed up one more time about 10 days later. He came alone. No papers, no wife, no prepared speech. He stood in the doorway of room 14 and looked at his uncle like he was trying to figure out what was left of the version of this situation he'd planned for. Uncle Albert was sitting up in the chair by the window. He looked at Tommy for a long moment, and then he said, simply, "Sit down, Thomas." Tommy sat. What happened next I wasn't there for. Uncle Albert told me about it afterward in pieces, over the following weeks as he got stronger and more himself. He said he told Tommy the truth plainly, that he knew what Tommy had been trying to do, that he understood Tommy was in debt, that the business he'd started had gone wrong, that he was afraid. He said he understood all of it, but he also said that fear was not a reason to steal from the person who'd known him since he was a kid sitting on a porch eating watermelon on the 4th of July. He said Tommy cried. He said he felt sorry for him, but he said sorry wasn't the same as signing. The cognitive evaluation came back. Albert had early-stage memory impairment but retained full legal capacity. He had the right to take his own decisions. And he had, weeks earlier, quietly, before any of this had come to a head, already made them. The afternoon he told me, he asked me to hand him the small leather case on his nightstand. He opened it himself, his hand steady, and he took out a folded document and held it out to me. "I thought about it a long time before I did this," he said. "I wasn't sure who to trust." He looked at me. "Then I remembered what you said. About paying attention." I unfolded the document. It took me a moment to understand what I was reading, and when I did, I had to set it down in my lap because my eyes had gone blurry. He had updated his will 3 weeks before Tommy ever showed up with papers. The house, the land past the county line, all of it was going to a local land trust that would preserve it as open space. A small percentage had been designated for a scholarship fund at the community college, in the name of his parents. And there was a personal letter attached, which I didn't read then, but which he told me was for me. He said he'd written it the morning after I'd first come back to sit with him, when he still wasn't sure if I was real or just something his memory had manufactured. He said he'd written it just in case, because he'd learned that just in case was often the most honest thing. I didn't read it until I was home, sitting at my kitchen table, in the same spot where I'd spent all those nights trying to figure out what to do. The letter was 3 paragraphs. It wasn't dramatic. It was just him, in the careful, deliberate voice I recognized from Thanksgiving tables a decade ago, saying that it meant something to him that I'd come. that he'd been sitting in that room for months, telling himself it didn't matter that no one came, and that I had made it harder to keep believing that. He said he hoped I knew what I'd done. Not the legal part, the other part. I folded it back up and sat there for a while. The kitchen was quiet. Outside someone was mowing their lawn. Normal Tuesday sounds from a normal Tuesday world. I thought about the first time I'd walked past that door and heard him say my grandmother's name. How I'd almost kept walking. How close I'd come to telling myself it wasn't my problem. It wasn't my family anymore. I'd already done my part by stepping away cleanly. I thought about all the doors I'd passed in that hallway and how every one of them had someone behind it who was waiting for something they were no longer sure would come. I went back on Thursday. I brought peanut butter crackers and a new plant, a small jade, because I'd read they live for decades if you take care of them. He was sitting up when I came in. The window was cracked, and there was actual air moving through the room for once. He looked at the plant and said, "That one will outlast both of us." "Probably," I said, and sat down beside him. We didn't talk about the will or the documents or Tommy or any of it. We talked about the trip to Montana he'd taken in 1987, except this time he remembered more details. The color of the water, the name of the town, the diner where he'd had the best pie of his life. He said it was sour cherry and that nothing had come close since. I told him I'd never had sour cherry pie. He looked genuinely appalled. He said that was a situation that needed correcting. I told him I'd look for one. He said, "Good, bring 2 forks." I said I would, and I meant it.